Imagine a figure operating right at the very heart of the American federal government, a person who wields this immense, almost unseen power, quietly shaping the very structure of our nation's bureaucracy.
Yeah.
From the most senior cabinet roles all the way down to critical judicial appointments.
Right.
This individual is effectively, well, one source called them the ghost in the system, and their background. It's shrouded in so much mystery, so many contradictions. It really raises some profound questions about who they are and what they're doing.
It really is an extraordinary scenario. I mean, for someone to hold such a pivotal role influencing thousands, literally thousands, of crucial appointments across every branch, every agency, and yet somehow maintain this almost totally opaque public profile, it definitely demands we take a closer look, a deep dive, you could say, into who they are and maybe more importantly, what they're actually doing.
And that's precisely our mission today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Oh.
We're pulling back the curtain on this quiet but undeniably influential figure, Sergio Gor. He's the director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel.
A very powerful office.
Extremely. Our mission here is to really extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from the sources we've looked at, giving you a shortcut, really, to being well-informed about someone whose influence is, as one source starkly put it, terrifyingly real.
Terrifyingly real. That's quite a statement.
It is. So we'll try to unravel his unique, often contradictory path to power. We'll unpack the controversies around his identity and explore the significant, maybe even irreversible implications of his actions for American democracy, for the nature of public service itself. Correct. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and it really is a necessary dive. I mean, our sources, they highlight that despite this remarkably low public profile, Sergio Gor is described by some as, well, arguably the most powerful person in the current administration, maybe second only to the president himself. His role isn't just influential. It directly touches, it shapes, and, potentially redefines every single corner of the federal government.
So let's start by laying out the sheer scope of that role. Director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel? PPO, they call it.
PPO, yeah.
Now, like you said, it's not an office you hear about every night on the news. Most people probably couldn't even name it. But our sources are emphatic. They call it the most powerful office in the federal government that nobody talks about.
Right.
Just think about that for a second. The most powerful office, but operating, largely in the shadows.
And that statement, it really isn't hyperbole when you understand what the PPO actually does. This office, it's the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
It identifies, it vets, and ultimately it appoints something like 4,000 political positions.
4,000.
Around 4,000, yeah, since spread across the entire federal government. And look, this isn't just a few high-level jobs, though it definitely includes those.
Right, the big names.
Exactly, but it's every single cabinet secretary, every deputy secretary, assistant secretary, ambassadors representing the U.S. overseas, federal judges.
Within our laws.
Yeah.
And
even U.S. attorneys, the ones prosecuting federal crimes across the country. The sheer volume of these jobs, combined with how strategically important they are, it makes the PPO this kind of choke point of immense concentrated power.
It really is. When the sources try to convey the scale of Gor's influence, they often compare him to two other really powerful figures in the administration.
Right.
They put him on par with Stephen Miller, known for shaping policy, the ideological direction, and Will Shaw, who apparently shapes what information, what viewpoints the president actually sees.
The gatekeeper of information, essentially.
Exactly. So this positions Gor as like a key trio, operating mostly behind the scenes, but collectively shaping the entire Trump administration, from its ideology to its daily operations, even how it perceives reality.
And this isn't just, internal whispers or assessments. Vice President Vance himself, he publicly confirmed Gor's importance. He said Gor has led the effort to ensure committed, principled, America First advocate staff the president's government.
So it's explicit.
It's explicit. It's not just about filling jobs or finding competent people. It's an ideological mission, a very specific, deliberate effort to make sure thousands of positions align with a particular political view and, crucially, personal loyalty.
So if you're listening right now, what does this mean for you? Why should you care about this person, this office, that mostly operates out of the spotlight?
Yeah, why does it matter?
Well, it means the person in this role, Sergio Gor, he fundamentally impacts who holds power, who carries out the day-to-day work of government. And that touches every aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
From, setting high-level policy on the environment at the EPA, to shaping foreign relations at state, to the legal decisions coming out of the DOJ affecting civil liberties, corporate accountability.
Even the judges.
Right. Judicial rulings in federal courts. They interpret laws. They impact millions. Gor's selections, they ripple through every single bit of American governance, every one of those 4,000 people. And the critical decisions they make, they're filtered through his office, reflecting his priorities, his vision for who should be in government. It's like this direct pipeline of power from one unelected person.
Right into the operational core of the entire federal system. Yeah. And this concentration of power, especially in the hands of someone who seems to prefer operating outside that, glare of public scrutiny, that's precisely why understanding Sergio Gor is so critical. It moves beyond just abstract policy talk and gets into the very practical question of who is actually doing the work of government and, under what guiding principles are they doing it.
And here's where this deep dive takes a truly fascinating, maybe deeply concerning turn. Because while Sergio Gor's present power is, well, undeniable, his origins, they're far less clear. Shrouded in this mist of conflicting accounts, missing records, it just deepens the mystery. His official biography, the public record from the White House, it says he was born in Malta, November 30, 1986. Seems simple enough, right? A basic fact.
You'd think so, but not at all. And this is where the questions really start piling up. Our sources found that when Maltese officials were given his exact birthday and asked to verify it, they found no record of his birth. None. No birth certificate, no hospital records from that date. Now, that's highly unusual, striking, really, for any individual, let alone someone holding such a high-level, sensitive job in the U.S. government.
A missing foundational document. That's a huge red flag for anyone needing a security clearance, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's fundamental. And it gets even more intriguing. Researchers digging into his past, they found traces of someone named Sergey Gorokhovsky.
Gorokhovsky.
Yeah, Sergey Gorokhovsky, who appeared in American records around 1999. And what's remarkable is how his name then seemed to, well, gradually morph over time through different spellings, eventually settling into Sergio Gor.
So not just a simple name change. It sounds more like a deliberate evolution of identity, a kind of systematic shedding of maybe previous personas.
That's how it appears. And former associates, speaking off the record, of course, reportedly whisper that he's actually from somewhere in the former Soviet bloc, or the USSR.
Oh, Soviet Union.
That's the whisper. And that he has been very, very careful to erase his tracks over the years. Now, this isn't just speculation floating around. There are reports, apparently, from neighbors back in Malta who remembered him from when he was younger. They reportedly recalled him as the Russian boy.
The Russian boy. Wow.
And when a reporter from the New York Post asked him directly about his birthplace, he wouldn't state it, other than just saying, not Russia.
So a denial, but not a clarification.
Exactly. This persistent refusal to clarify, combined with the whispers, the missing records, it just adds layer upon layer to this whole enigma.
But wait, despite the complete lack of official birth records from Malta, the island's deputy prime minister did confirm that a Sergio Gor went to school there and speaks fluent Maltese.
That's correct. So there is some undeniable connection to Malta. School records, language fluency. But those foundational birth records, the ones that usually establish citizenship, conspicuously absent.
So this situation, it's led the sources to openly question, well, everything. His origins, his motivations. Is he, as they speculate, a KGB legacy asset? A plant.
Or maybe just a grifter, a con artist who cleverly manipulated his way up.
Or simply an ambitious immigrant who took really unusual steps to obscure his past for, personal gain.
It's a huge spectrum of possibilities, and it leaves this truly unsettling number of unanswered questions about the man controlling so many critical government jobs.
And the questions about his identity, they get even more complicated because of this astonishing revelation about the SF-86 form.
Ah, the SF-86.
For those listening who aren't familiar, maybe explain what that is.
Sure. The SF-86, Standard Form 86, it's mandatory. It's this exhaustive background check form, over 100 pages long. Anyone seeking a federal security clearance has to fill it out.
Everyone.
Pretty much everyone needing clearance. It demands incredibly detailed disclosure, foreign ties, financial relationships where you've lived, worked, even mental health history, any potential conflicts of interest. The whole point is to make sure federal employees aren't vulnerable, to blackmail, coercion, undue foreign influence. It's about protecting national security.
Okay, so standard procedure, crucial for security. But here's where we hit another really striking double standard. As of June 2025, our sources say Sergio Gor has not filed his mandatory SF-86 form.
Still hasn't filed it.
That's what the sources indicate. The man who holds the keys to thousands of federal jobs, the guy who vets candidates rigorously digging into old tweets, political donations, public statements.
The ultimate vetter.
Right. This same individual apparently refuses a basic background check required of entry-level employees.
Right.
It's almost unbelievable.
And his reasoning, reportedly, is that he sees the form as a kind of deep state trap, designed specifically to weed out Trump loyalists by digging into their pasts.
A trap.
That's the reported view. Now, the White House, their official stance is that Gore is fully compliant with all applicable ethical and legal obligations. They say he has an active interim security clearance and has completed the form.
Completed it,
But crucially, they haven't confirmed when it was actually submitted, or if it's been fully processed for a permanent clearance. This persistent lack of transparency from the White House about someone with such immense sensitive power, it's a huge point of concern for oversight bodies, for journalists. It just leaves this gaping hole in national security oversight for the very person vetting the nation's top officials.
It's really something. And adding even more complexity to this opaque past are these persistent allegations of Russian connections.
Right, the Russia links.
Back in 2016, apparently some online information surfaced that linked Gore's email password to a Russian national, someone named Sergey Gorokhovsky. What's particularly unsettling about this, according to the sources, is that the whole story, the original posts, they just mysteriously disappeared from the internet. Researchers reportedly just stopped talking about it.
Scrubbed clean.
Seems like it. Now, some later disputed the direct link, maybe called it a coincidence. But the initial connection itself and the way it was erased, it fueled a lot of suspicion back then.
And there was more, wasn't there? Something about email accounts.
Yeah. There's also a claim of email accounts registered in the .u domain.
Yeah.
You know, Russia's country code linked to a Russian citizen. And, this is documented fact, he went with Senator Rand Paul on that 2018 trip to Moscow.
He accompanied the senator to Moscow.
These aren't, isolated things. When you piece them together, they contribute to this pattern of unanswered questions, hidden details. What's truly fascinating and maybe deeply concerning here is just the sheer volume, the persistence of these questions, these allegations, surrounding a figure who wields such immense power right at the heart of the U.S. government.
Yeah, for someone in his position, you'd demand transparency, an unblemished background. But for Sergio Gor, both seem largely elusive.
Okay, so from the deep mysteries of his identity, let's shift to the surprising path of his career. You might think someone in such a powerful job would have this long-established track record at the highest levels, right? Political strategy, government.
Conventional path, yeah.
But our sources reveal some truly, humbling and frankly unusual beginnings that show a very particular kind of drive.
That's right. Gore didn't start in some fancy office. He began with decidedly humbling entry-level work. And maybe the most memorable detail, the one that really speaks volumes about his early approach, goes back to 2008.
Okay.
That's when he gained a certain notoriety for heckling Barack Obama rallies, often doing it while dressed in a squirrel costume.
A squirrel costume? Seriously, it sounds like something out of a political comedy sketch.
It does. But our sources emphasize this wasn't just some bizarre stunt. It showed this profound willingness to do whatever it took to get noticed, to break through the noise, make an impact, no matter how unconventional, even ridiculous.
Huh. So it suggests an early understanding that, sometimes the best way to get noticed is to make yourself ridiculous.
Yeah.
It speaks to a certain, maybe relentless drive, an unconventional, almost theatrical approach to politics.
I think that's fair. This early willingness to be unconventional, to show loyalty, to grab attention, even in these surprising ways, it seems to be a consistent theme in his improbable rise.
So fast forward from the squirrel suit. By 2020, just over a decade later, he'd clearly cultivated significant access, significant influence. Most notably, he co-founded Winning Team Publishing.
Ah, yes, the publishing house.
With Donald Trump Jr.
Exactly. And this wasn't just, a standard publishing company. It was strategic.
Highly strategic. Winning Team Publishing, it printed books by Trump family members, key allies.
Yeah.
Directly cashing in on the powerful Trump brand and what the sources call the cult of personality around him. So money was involved.
Oh, definitely. Considerable financial aspects. But beyond that, it served as this crucial relationship-building exercise. It let Gore demonstrate unwavering personal loyalty, not just to the movement, but directly to the Trump family. It positioned him as someone who not only got the Trump political world, but also knew how to monetize it, how to amplify its message. It was really a masterclass in showing value and total allegiance.
And that strategic positioning, built on loyalty and access, it just kept accelerating, didn't it? Between 2020 and 2024, he ran Right for America, a Super PAC.
Right. And this PAC raised an absolutely astonishing $72 million, a staggering sum, primarily spent attacking Joe Biden and relentlessly promoting Donald Trump.
$72 million. That's incredible. And what's really notable here, you mentioned this earlier, is that because of how Super PAC disclosure rules work,
Big opacity, yeah.
we don't really know where a lot of that money came from. The source is called a shell game of donations. Money routed through various entities hiding the original donors.
It's very hard to trace.
But regardless of where it came from, that huge fundraising haul, it undeniably bought him access to Donald Trump himself. It cemented him as a key player, someone who could generate massive financial resources for the cause. Money and loyalty, right? Clearly the most potent currencies in that political ecosystem.
Clearly. And then, after the 2024 election win, Gore's choice for his next role was, well, remarkably clear and very revealing.
How so?
Well, you might expect someone with that kind of fundraising muscle that demonstrated loyalty to aim for a high-profile cabinet job, right? The usual reward.
Sure, secretary of something.
Exactly. Instead, he made this deliberate, calculated choice. He didn't seek public acclaim. He sought behind-the-scenes control by becoming the director of the Presidential Personnel Office.
The PPO. Back to where we started.
Back to the PPO. It just highlights this profound, deliberate pursuit of quiet systemic power. Not the fleeting visibility of a public office. It really underscores his preference for operating from the shadows, where the real levers of government get pulled.
Okay, so now let's really focus on how he's using that power. Because this is where the implications for the future of American government get really profound. Our sources are incredibly clear about Gore's method, his primary, maybe his only, criterion for filling those 4,000 jobs.
What is it?
It's based on one criterion and one criterion only. Absolute, unquestioning loyalty to Donald Trump personally.
Personally. Not just party loyalty, but personal loyalty to the man himself.
That's what the sources state. And this approach, it dramatically shifts the whole traditional way federal appointments are made, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It elevates personal allegiance above long-standing criteria, like qualifications, professional experience, demonstrated competence. Our sources describe it as effectively turning the PPO into an ideological purity test.
A purity test?
Yeah, where aligning with the president's personal views, his political agenda, that's paramount. It supersedes even the most impressive professional credentials.
We have a really stark example of this, don't we? The case of Jared Isaacman.
Ah, yes, Isaacman, the billionaire astronaut.
Right. Widely seen as highly qualified to lead NASA. He's a successful entrepreneur, yes, but also a trained astronaut. Commanded the Inspiration 4 mission. He had exactly the kind of relevant expertise, proven leadership you'd want for NASA.
Seemed like a perfect fit on paper. And wasn't he approved by a Senate committee?
He was. Bipartisan approval from the Senate committee, indicating broad acceptance of his capabilities.
Okay, so qualified, Senate committee approved. But Sergio Gor reportedly blocked his appointment.
He did. And the reason...
What was it?
Isaac Markman had once donated money to Democratic candidates.
Once. How much? Recently?
Apparently not a lot. Not recently. And certainly not enough to indicate any current political alignment that would stop him serving. But that single detail, that was enough.
Just that past donation. Wow.
That action must have sent a massive message through Washington. Oh, completely. Clear, unmistakable, and profoundly impactful. The message was, loyalty to Trump is more important than qualifications, more important than experience, more important than competence. It signaled that even the most qualified people, if they had any tiny hint of past political independence, they were unacceptable.
And this didn't stay quiet, did it? It spilled out into the public, the feud with Elon Musk.
Exactly. Musk, obviously powerful and influential himself, had strongly pushed for Isaacman, believed he was the ideal guy for NASA.
Right.
So when Gore blocked it, Musk just lashed out publicly, called Gore a snake guilty of serious crimes. And he specifically alleged Gore lied about his birthplace on federal forms.
Bringing up those identity questions again.
Directly referencing them.
So Musk versus Gore, what happened?
Well, what's fascinating here and really revealing about Gore's position, he didn't flinch. Despite being publicly attacked by one of the world's richest, most influential people, the administration, Trump's team, they basically allowed Gore to publicly humiliate Musk.
They backed Gore over Musk.
It seems so. And that sent this incredibly powerful, chilling message. Even the wealthiest, most connected people couldn't challenge Sergio Gore's authority. The lesson learned in D.C., according to our sources, never duel a man who controls the president's hiring desk.
Wow. His control over appointments gave him this kind of immunity. Even Musk couldn't break through it.
And the sources say Musk couldn't let it go. He held this grudge. Felt Gore had not only blocked him, but maybe even laughed at him, especially after a later SpaceX rocket explosion, which Musk maybe saw as, proving his point about needing competence. So this personal animosity, it's so intense, sources suggest Musk might have actively fed info to journalists, trying to get them to dig up more dirt on Gore.
So this feud is ongoing, fueled by grudges.
Expected to continue simmering, yeah, fueled by their inability to let things go.
This whole episode, from blocking Isaacman to the public fight with Musk, it's such a stark illustration how personal loyalty, perceived slights, they can just derail critical government appointments. Even with someone exceptionally qualified, widely supported, it just hammers home the administration's priorities, political allegiance, personal fealty, over expertise and merit, even in really critical roles.
But perhaps the most impactful, the most far-reaching action Sergio Gore has taken, one that political operatives have apparently been dreaming about for decades.
Okay, what's that?
It's the revival of Schedule F, which he successfully achieved in June 2025. And this isn't just, a policy tweak. It's a game changer for the entire federal workforce, for the very nature of American governance.
Schedule F, okay, yeah, that's huge. To really grasp the gravity of this, maybe we should quickly explain the traditional structure.
Good idea. Go ahead.
Okay. So, historically, the vast majority of federal employees, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, they're civil servants.
Right.
This means they're hired based on merit through competitive processes. And they're largely protected from political retaliation.
Meaning?
Meaning they can't just be fired because a new president comes in and dislikes their politics or their advice. This whole system, it was carefully designed over decades to create a professional, nonpartisan federal workforce to ensure continuity, institutional memory, expertise, regardless of who's in the Oval Office. It's meant to be the stable backbone serving the public interest, not just one party or one person.
Okay, that's the traditional system. But Schedule F, it dramatically, fundamentally changes this.
Completely flips it. It's an executive order that effectively converts thousands of federal civil servants into political appointees. It strips away their civil service protection.
Thousands, just like that.
Potentially thousands. The reclassification means they can now be fired at will by the president or his designees. No cause needed. No real due process.
Fired at will. And here's the kicker, right? The part that brings it back to Gore.
Exactly. Sergio Gor is the individual who decides which employees get reclassified under Schedule F, and crucially, which ones are then targeted for firing.
So he holds the pen on who stays and who goes among potentially thousands of career officials.
Unprecedented power that lets him remove huge swaths of the existing federal bureaucracy and replace them with, presumably, Trump loyalists. Think about the implications.
Like what?
Well, removing experienced EPA scientists who accept climate change research, replacing career DOJ lawyers who might interpret the law differently than the administration wants, systematically purging CIA analysts whose intelligence reports might contradict the preferred worldview.
It's a potential wholesale removal of expertise, of institutional memory, replacing it purely with ideological alignment.
That's the fear. Critics across the political spectrum, they see this as nothing less than the end of nonpartisan government. A radical transformation of the federal workforce into a patronage system. Jobs awarded for political favor, not merit.
They've called it a bloodless bureaucratic coup, haven't they?
They have. A quiet administrative takeover of the machinery of government. Now, Gore himself, he frames it differently. He talks about efficiency. Suggests it removes entrenched bureaucrats who block the administration's agenda.
Efficiency versus coup. Big difference in framing.
Huge. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises that truly profound, unsettling question. What kind of government do we actually get when competence, expertise, institutional memory, when all that takes a backseat to personal loyalty, to ideological purity? What happens to the day-to-day functioning of agencies handling everything from public health to national security when staff are picked mainly for allegiance?
It feels like it could fundamentally alter the effectiveness, the independence, the very integrity of the federal government. It's a seismic shift, away from a merit-based system designed for the long haul, for the nation.
Towards one where political alignment is the #1 requirement, even for the most critical jobs. The long-term consequences for how policy gets made, for accountability, for the quality of public service, they could be profound, deeply destabilizing, potentially.
All right, this brings us to the broader implications of Sergio Gor's actions, of the shadow power he wields so carefully, not just for this administration, but for the future of American governance itself. Our sources, they don't mince words here. They describe his actions as a fundamental subversion of democratic norms and institutions.
Strong words, but yeah. His systematic approach to staffing, it's seen as actively changing what the federal government is, transforming it from a public trust, right? An entity meant to serve everyone.
Into what?
Into what the sources call a private fiefdom, where the government's vast machinery is viewed as serving the interests of one specific patron or select few, not the broad public interests. And that just undermines the whole foundation of public service, the impartial execution of laws.
And central to this transformation, you argue, is the erosion of two key pillars of democracy.
Democratic principles and transparency, absolutely. Democracies, they need transparency. They need accountability from those with power. Yet Gore, according to these sources, thrives in the absence of transparency.
He prefers the shadows.
It seems so. He's built his entire career on opacity, on misdirection, on the careful cultivation of mystery. And his refusal to file the SF-86, that mandatory background check everyone else does, it perfectly exemplifies this profound lack of transparency, this preference for operating outside the normal checks. It just creates an environment ripe for suspicion, for unaccountability.
And then there's the competence issue again.
Right.
Prioritizing loyalty over qualifications.
It inherently undermines competence and expertise.
Right.
If the most capable people get screened out because they aren't aligned politically in the right way, or if experienced people get fired and replaced by loyalists without the right skills.
Then what happens?
Well, inevitably, you get less qualified people in critical jobs. And that could severely impact how effective agencies are, how much integrity they have, from national security to public health. It diminishes their ability to actually serve the American public competently. The quality of governance itself is really at stake.
And then there's that lingering concern, the potential for undisclosed foreign influence, hidden agendas.
Given his background.
Yeah.
Gore's profoundly opaque past, those persistent questions about his real birthplace, the alleged Russia links, when you combine that with the immense behind-the-scenes power he now holds over thousands of critical jobs,
It creates what?
it creates a breeding ground for suspicion regarding who he truly serves. That's how one source put it. When the person controlling such sensitive, far-reaching hiring has such a mysterious, unverified personal history, it rightly raises serious national security concerns about foreign influence, about undisclosed loyalties. It's this vacuum of information that just invites alarm.
And perhaps the most alarming implication, the one that really brings home that phrase, terrifyingly real, is the difficulty, maybe impossibility, of reversing these changes.
That's the warning from our sources. They caution that once the American government undergoes this fundamental shift from public trust based on merit to this private fiefdom where bureaucracy is just about personal loyalty, it may be impossible to reverse.
Impossible to reverse?
That's the fear. The long-term implications are profound, potentially permanent, fundamentally altering the nature of American governance, making it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for future administrations to restore that traditional nonpartisan civil service.
And despite holding this immense transformative power, affecting every political appointment, thousands of civil servants, Sergio Gor remains largely invisible to most Americans, unknown to most voters, and crucially, unaccountable to most oversight.
Right. This profound lack of public scrutiny, of accountability, it allows him to operate with what critics call impunity, quietly implementing what they see as that bloodless bureaucratic coup, without ever really having to answer to the public or even to traditional checks and balances.
The source Allison knows, which apparently tracked Gor's activities meticulously, they conclude their reporting with this powerful warning. Gor's power is terrifyingly real. He is actively remaking the federal government in ways that are deeply concerning.
And their urgent message.
It's for listeners, for all of us, to turn on the lights, to shine a spotlight on this figure, to demand much greater transparency, much greater accountability for the quiet but undeniably profound influence he wielded over the entire apparatus of American government.
Turn on the lights. It's a good metaphor.
So we've navigated this complex, often mysterious world of Sergio Gor, a figure whose quiet, pervasive influence is demonstrably reshaping the very fabric of the federal government.
Yeah. From those disputed origins, the allegations about his past, to his strategic, unconventional rise, and his controversial methods, staffing the bureaucracy with personal loyalists.
His story really highlights how critical it is to understand where true power actually resides and how it often operates far from the public eye,
Yeah.
in the quiet corners of Washington.
It really is a powerful reminder. Some of the most significant, most enduring changes to our government, to our democratic institutions,
Right.
they can happen through these unseen mechanisms, orchestrated by individuals who prefer the shadows, making decisions that just ripple outwards, affecting every single citizen.
So as these lines blur between a professional civil service based on merit and a political apparatus driven purely by personal loyalty, consider this. How much transparency do we truly require from those staffing the highest levels of government, especially when their personal histories are as opaque as the power they wield?
It's a crucial question.
And what does it mean for a democracy when these vital mechanisms of power operate largely in the shadows, potentially transforming institutions in ways that, as our sources warn, might be impossible to reverse? We really encourage you to continue to explore these questions and demand answers.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration has given you a clearer understanding of the profound forces at play within our government, and why figures like Sergio Gor, perhaps, deserve far more scrutiny than they currently receive.
And as always, we encourage you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep digging.